How was that battery?
I don't know. I checked it like 3 hours ago and it was still going, but it's still good.
Yeah, that would be enough.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you all had a fantastic day. I know you guys have heard this a few times, but please remember to fill out your feedback. It helps us grow and innovate and make our programs even better. We are also on track for executing all of our meetings on site so we can make a donation to a charity. So hopefully we continue that all tomorrow. But as you finish eating, I'm delighted to introduce you tonight to the former Chief Sustainability Officer at General Motors, Kristen Seaman. So please join me in welcoming Kristen.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it. And hopefully you all can still keep eating and enjoy yourselves. And my table here said that if I did, whoops, it's already going forward for me. There we go. Said that if I didn't do a good job, they were going to eat my dessert. So hopefully that I do okay and I get to come back to the table and enjoy some good dessert. again, thank you for having me here. It really is a joy. And as I thought about what I wanted to talk about today, you know, I could stand up here and talk about how sustainability is important. I'm sure we've all gone to lots of conferences, talk about why now is the important time for us to act. We've all heard every, you know, company XYZ give all of the great statistics on what they're doing. So I want to try and maybe just tilt it a little bit to tell you a little bit about my story, hopefully offer maybe some perspective, some words of advice about how we get through really this difficult environment that we're in, although it seems like that's also a topic that we continue to talk about, being a difficult environment. So a little bit about me, my story. You know, I was with General Motors for over 30 years. 27 of those I spent in product development. I grew up in the electrical space, led a number of our large engineering teams, never touched sustainability. I also never touched facilities or construction, which was, as somebody described in the car this morning, the bonus job that I got along with this. And I'll tell you, it is a very thankless job. Nobody calls you and thanks you for turning the heat on in the morning. So when I got the phone call, my first question was, why me? How was an engineer who had been, you know, doing this for their entire career, who, as my kids would say, Mom, you're not a tree hugger, going to lead the sustainability role? And in reality, what I learned was that it really was an engineering problem, and quickly realized that we could approach it just like every other challenge that we have. And so I dug in and started to learn. During those first few months, weeks, whatever, I really felt like I was swimming in what I called alphabet soup of sustainability. I think many of you can attest to the thousands of acronyms that exist, whether it be about the reporting, the frameworks, all of the different things. You know, again, thinking back to my engineering days, or maybe, you know, junior high algebra, I felt like I was given an equation with 3 variables and asked to solve it with only the one equation. So it really became very tough to get through this. But what I really thought about, again, taking it back to engineering, you know, how do we understand the problem? How do we identify areas to improve? And how do we build smarter, more efficient solutions? And so that's what I did to try and approach this big, giant task that was in front of us. So once I kind of got through that and thought about, okay, how do I define sustainability? What does sustainability mean to me? And it really, you know, once I got through all the acronyms, it's really about efficiency and resiliency. It's focusing on long-term strategies and really bringing everyone together to work through those. It's about looking for opportunities for improvement, innovation that delivers long-term value and growth opportunities. In reality, it simply is risk management and future-proofing the business. And if you look at it through that lens, I think it takes away, 1, some of the complexity, and 2, some of the debate, which we tend to debate everything. So, you know, there's lots of skeptics out there. You know, you can start with the who really believes in climate change anyway. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier that said they never use that word when they talk about what they're doing in this space. So while there are skeptics, you can't argue the facts that exist. And it's hard to ignore, regardless of the cause, these things that are impacting us. You know, extreme weather events have a huge impact. And the impact of these things are causing lots of other results. Insurance premiums are going up. Water supplies are a challenge. Power supply is a challenge, and energy supply. You know, event that happens around the world can have an impact on your supply chain, maybe tier 2, tier 3 down the line. So regardless of what you think, regardless of what the skeptics will say, these are facts that are impacting business and that we all really need to focus on and find ways to get around. In 2022 alone, there was $165 billion in the US from weather or climate impact to business. And that was only from 18 separate events. So if you think about how huge this is to our economy, if we don't focus on addressing it now, we're really going to be having some challenges later on. The DOE will tell you that power outages cost U.S. businesses about $150 billion annually. And one single event around the world can cause this gigantic impact. If you think back to some of the big ones in memory, the earthquakes, the tsunami, right, that hit, those were way back, 10, 15 years ago, but they still had an impact on what we need to do from a supply chain. McKinsey has done studies that say over 90% of companies agree that climate change or climate impact or extreme weather events are an impact to their business and have caused disruptions. So why should businesses care? One, it saves money, right? Whether you believe it or not, others are paying attention. Investors are paying attention. Your customers are paying attention. Your employees are paying attention. Employees care about this and what it means to them. So if you focus just on the short term, saving money, I used to walk into our assembly plants, and for those of you that have industrials in your space, the assembly plant, their job is to focus on the product getting out the door that day. There's their number one metric, beyond safety, quality, et cetera. But that's what they're measured on. What I would ask them to do is I'd approach it from the standpoint of, I said, I'm not asking you to do anything your parents didn't teach you. So turn off the lights, quit running the water, and shut the doors, and don't let all the air out of the building. And if you just do that, we'll both be happy, right? It helps me from a sustainability standpoint, but at the end of the day, it saves them money, and that's what's important. If you look at what investors are looking for, there's a lot of debate that investors don't care about sustainability anymore. I think many of us that are in the room, again, whatever you call it, they do care. They care about the risk management. They care that you have a plan to address in the case of these events. They care that you have a stable supply chain and that your business is ready for the future. From a regulation standpoint, we talked earlier today about EPR. The regulations are coming. Whether they're here today or they've been delayed or Europe is debating whether CSRD is going to continue or not, it's going to come. So now's the time to get ready. Now's the time to plan, to measure, and start understanding where you're at. Talked about employee engagement and retention, and then brand loyalty and trust. A lot of times we think about somebody's not, and I would agree that most customers today are not willing, they don't want to pay more, they don't want to give up any convenience or any features, so they don't want to sacrifice anything. But if you have a negative associated with climate impact, that's a different story. One of the things that I would talk about in our company was, let's be a good neighbor. How do we show up in the community? Does our site look good? What is our trucking routes? Do we disturb the neighbors as we're taking vehicles out of the plant late at night, or those type of things? And all of that, how you show up as a company builds brand loyalty and trust. Most of us will never be the Patagonias where somebody's willing to pay much more money for a product. But if you have the opposite occur, it can impact you in the long run. So in short, you all know, sustainability is not the easy thing to do, but it is the right thing to do. And it really is the smart thing to do from a business standpoint. It does cut costs. It does drive business opportunity. And really focusing on those savings of what it can do from an operations standpoint. Businesses that implement efficiencies tend to save about 30% in overall energy costs. That's kind of the standard that's out there. Efficient buildings have savings of over $1.60 per square foot is what the estimate is. And that comes from not only operations, but it comes from the maintenance of the building. It also comes from things like janitorial services. Even if you think about your facilities, in our case, everything we did to reduce waste was less waste that we had to pay to truck out of the facility and take to a landfill somewhere. And so all of those have an impact over time. It also increases property values for either rent or resale of a facility if it has energy efficiency built into it. From a GM perspective, through things like energy treasure hunts or energy optimization that we would do, and energy treasure hunts, for those that aren't familiar, we would take a group of various folks, sometimes suppliers, sometimes engineers, sometimes facility management, and we would go into a facility and look for opportunities. Where is there leakages? Where is there equipment that maybe is not being shut down properly? And then we would share those learnings across the company. On average, we would save about $20 million a year just from that exercise alone. There's other statistics out there that Walmart has about $100 million annual savings from adopting energy efficiency technologies. Toyota saved over $12 million annually with their zero waste initiatives. Many others, Coca-Cola saved over a decade about $2 billion by focusing on water technologies and saving water in their facilities and reuse and those type of things. So again, this is a business issue. It is a smart decision. It builds long-term resiliency. And regardless of what the skeptics may say, nobody argues about saving money. It's also bigger than politics. Again, we tend to be in an environment where everything is political. But with the current climate, I think it's easy for companies to choose to ignore sustainability. The reality is, in my opinion, it's more important than ever for us to focus on it. Now's the time to build it into your business strategy. Maybe when people aren't paying attention. As I would say, let's do more and talk less, and focus on what we're going to impact in the long run. Major corporations are requiring accountability from their supply base. So whether you have your own requirements or not, the big Fortune 500 companies have made commitments that they're standing behind, and they're going to expect suppliers to come along with them. States and municipalities, again, we talked about, continue to issue regulations, and more are probably coming as they look at the impact to their communities and their residents. And climate-related supply chain disruptions are not slowing down. Even if I talk personally about climate impact or extreme weather events in our area, I live in a subdivision where apparently the water drainage the sewer system wasn't big enough for the weather events that we get. And so every year when it occurs, the township tells us that it's a 100-year rain. Well, unfortunately, it's happening once a year, twice a year, as I watch my flowers literally float down the street. It's happening. And so it really, we have to think about it. We can't ignore it. We need to operationalize that savings and that efficiency into our business models across the board. So where do you start? I'm guessing that most folks in this room have started, that this isn't something you're not familiar with. But if you haven't, engage your leadership. It has to start with leadership. You need leadership to buy in and be driving this, not just support it. They need to be active players. My goal with NGM was that sustainability would be looked at and thought about like safety and quality were. Safety and quality are part of everyone's role. Yes, there's a safety team. Yes, there's a quality team. But nobody gets a pass. You need to do the same thing for sustainability. What does the design engineer think about when they're building that part? How do you think about recyclability or remanufacturing or the end of life or the circularity right from the very beginning? That's when we'll win. Do a baseline assessment. Start measuring, right? What's your current energy usage? What's your water usage? What are you recycling? How much waste do you have? Understand where you're at, and then start making progress. Define your why. This has to become part of your culture. That's the only way that it truly will have an impact. Maybe it's compliance, maybe it's your customers, Maybe it's your employees, whatever it is, define the why that's driving you to make progress here. Set clear, ambitious, and achievable goals. I think sometimes as much as I talked about alphabet soup at the beginning, when I came into this role, it also felt like number soup. You know, we had 50% by 2030, 100% by 2039, or 2040, everybody was making a commitment. But I think in a lot of cases, people didn't put the steps in place. As an engineer, I wanted the path, right? How do I measure? How do I get there at the end? And so I think having a plan that enables you to measure and track and see progress is super important. Engage your employees. Show them where they can make a difference. Meet them where they're at. Have that conversation with the plant. You know, one of my favorite days in the role was I went to one of our assembly plants and was talking. And there was a culture, great culture, where when you would go to the plants, a lot of times some of the big leadership meetings would have both the union leadership as well as the salary leadership or plant management in the discussions so that it was a joint effort. And I remember the union chairman telling me that he's like, I want to understand this so I can translate it to my team. He said, I remember what this plant used to smell like. You know, and it really hit me of how much this really is, as much as we're trying to do it for maybe other reasons, it really is a health and safety issue when you think about the air quality and what they're exposed to. And so it really was eye-opening to me and exciting to see that everyone saw a benefit for whatever it was for them personally. You know, focus on quick wins. Tell the stories where you save. Friendly competition is always good. And then just continue to measure, improve, and repeat. You know, these are tough assignments, whether you're supply chain or whether you're sustainability, or in some cases, those are now one, which I think is fantastic and another great reason for this conference to be together. You know, my team would sometimes get stuck of how to start. You know, they see this big giant mountain in front of them and they don't know how to get to the top. And so they're afraid to take the first step. But if you don't take the first step, you'll never get to the top. So I encourage everyone, just start if you haven't started. Then, once you started, how do you keep moving? You know, I'm sure many of you are, again, far along in your journey, but you need to keep moving. Even if your company says they care about sustainability, but they're not willing to talk about it right now. It's a tough time. It's a tough time to be in the limelight or to get challenged. In some cases, you probably have net zero goals, but there's no budget for sustainability, right? We talked about it earlier. Nobody's willing to pay more for this space. Policy feels like it's in a tailspin. You don't know what you're required to do today or what you're required to do tomorrow. Regulatory requirements seem to be changing daily. You know, and even collaboration efforts. We were talking during the reception about how difficult it is to sometimes come together with your competitors. There's great examples out there. We talked about some things that are happening both in the food and beverage space, and again, something that we did in the auto industry around pulling our supply base together around renewable energy purchases. And those are great opportunities, even to get your toughest competitor together to find ways. If we all ask for something different, it's going to drive the cost up. And so collaboration is extremely important. So one of the things that I think we really need to kind of focus on too is what is the risk of not acting? The Navy SEALs consider 3 components when they evaluate operation. First, they think the risk to the mission, right? What are the various issues that can happen to personnel, equipment? How can the mission fail? They also think about the risk to the force, right? What are the people impacts? And third is they think of the risk of not acting. What happens if they don't take the mission? So how many of us are in companies where we often talk about the risk of not acting? I don't think enough. And I think that's a huge opportunity in this space. You know, many of these things I talked about already and what the impact is of what happens if we don't act in this space. higher insurance premiums, reduced revenues and sales. If you think about the impact to your customers for supply chain shortages and what that does to their confidence in you as a supplier, in many cases, suppliers are going to be, or customers are going to be asking for your sustainability commitments to help them meet theirs. Legal liabilities. If you've made commitments, what are the risks around greenwashing or green hushing, or investors that are going to pull out? Again, regardless of what they call it, investors are still paying attention to what your risk plans are. Talked a little bit about reputational damage. One environmental spill can easily pay for one sustainability project. And we don't talk enough about that. We don't talk about the risk of not acting in this space. Loss of competitive advantage. If you're not a company that has purpose and commitment, there's many employees that you're not going to attract the best talent. And the next generation behind us has even more commitment and passion around this space than we do. So how do you avoid not acting? And I think it's kind of three key pieces. The first is speed, the ability to deploy and act and move quickly to stay ahead of your competition. One of my favorite lines is better, not perfect, right? If we strive for perfection, we're never going to get there. But how do you make it better every single day? How do you have the tenacity, the drive to stick with the mission? One of the favorite quotes my husband gave me my husband retired from Stellantis and had a career in stamping, which is a very tough environment. Our kids during COVID used to hear a lot of the conversations on the phone, and their take was, "Mom, you work with a lot more nice people than Dad does." But what he said was, somebody told him, someone cannot tell you no unless they have the authority to say yes. And I think it's a really powerful way to think about things. Think of how many times you get into a meeting and somebody has an issue, or somebody tells you why you can't do it or shouldn't do it. How many times is that the same person who has the authority to give you budget or headcount or approval? So don't accept no. Keep going. And then find the people. Find the people that have the tenacity, are willing to act with speed, and are willing to adapt, right? A lot of times you're going to come into a situation where things don't go as planned. Many of us probably had to reevaluate what our commitments were and how fast maybe we could get there. For us, it was, EV adoption rates certainly weren't at the speed that we had hoped. It doesn't mean we gave up. We just had to adapt and move things a little bit different. And probably I'd wrap up this topic with, sometimes the worst decision you can make is no decision. So keep moving forward, keep taking steps. Sometimes you're going to stumble and things are going to move backwards, but I think if you keep acting, eventually the progress will go forward. We talked again about the curve of progress is never smooth, right? There's always ups and downs associated with it. So if I think back to my own self and what I was doing at GM, what could I have done to combat inaction a little bit earlier? So I put some things here on the board and maybe some great examples. The put points on the board today. Another line I would give my team, right? As a mom of 3 boys, a lot of sports analogies come from me. But I had a time where I walked into an assembly plant visit and the trash compactor was down. And so I asked the team, I said, well, what are we doing about it? Well, we called the supplier, new one's coming in a couple weeks. Well, did we escalate it? Why a couple weeks? Well, it was the commitment they gave. Instead of really focusing and thinking about how do they act like the line was down? If the line was down in the plant, you don't wait, right? It's urgent. And so I needed to get my team really engaged in focusing on this wasn't something that could wait. Yes, it was one trash compactor. It wasn't going to impact us hugely, but it was something. We had to have that mentality. I'd say be creative on business cases. One of the great success stories at GM was our renewable energy plan, where we kind of proposed it to the leadership team as a zero-sum game. Some were going to make money, some were going to lose money, but at the end, we expected to be pretty flat. Most of the time, we were pretty positive, which was awesome for lots of reasons. But be creative on how you do a business case. Engage the believers, right? The more army you can build of people that support sustainability, the better. Those will be the ones that'll go walk alongside you and start spreading the word. You know, that's kind of the build the army as well, right? Share the winnings. And this one of the things that we did when we looked at the plant's energy budget, traditionally the budget was set and fluctuated based on rates. And so we changed that, and we gave them a flat rate at the beginning of the year, and they were only measured on usage, and the rates were managed at a corporate level. So the plants now had incentive to be more efficient, right? Drive friendly competition. We also sent out once a week a shutdown report that showed how low the plant could go when they shut down all the equipment. When you're being compared against your peers and it's shared, you really start to focus and work on it. You know, tell the stories, share the wins. Everybody likes recognition. That plant that had the lowest shutdown got credit, right? Somebody was responsible for. And then share the learnings, right? I talked about the energy treasure hunts and how we would share that across the plan. So yes, there was more I could have done to combat inaction earlier, but keep moving forward. Better, not perfect. So how do you stay positive in this environment, right? You know, keep having patience. You know, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. The driving organic change and really pushing it across the company. I mentioned earlier, show, not tell. Keep showing the results. You don't need to talk about them if you don't want to talk about them, but show the progress that you're making. Be curious, and this one to me I think is important in whatever you do. Ask questions, and ask questions not to, I used to tell new teams when I would go into a new assignment, I'm not asking questions to challenge or stump you. I'm asking questions because I want to learn. And sometimes the questions that get asked, sometimes the most simple questions, are the ones to cause people to rethink why we do something. You know, so be curious. Create the path to move forward. And then maybe as much as I said leadership needs to drive it, don't wait for leadership. Be the leader that makes this happen. Be the leader that doesn't accept no and keeps moving forward. Be the optimist. And at the end of the day, I think culture trumps everything. You get the people engaged, you get the right culture, you'll make a lot of progress. So again, really and simple, what can you do today? Just start. If you're not moving, just start. You know, put points on the board today. Focus on better, not perfect. That first step to get to the top of the mountain, right, is what's going to take you there faster. Adopt a holistic approach to sustainability. I thought it was brilliant of the individual who talked about not using those terms in the company and really driving the action versus creating emotion around it. And develop a plan to integrate sustainability throughout the company. Meet people where they're at and where they want to go. And then I'll end with a quote. I think this is really kind of the epitome of what we all deal with, right? Water that is too pure has no fish. The opportunity lies in the murky water. And I really think that it's not a clear path of how we're going to get there. Nobody has the right recipe or answers, but we've got to keep looking for it. So again, thank you. I'll wrap up with, you know, we can compete on products, but we have to collaborate on solutions. We have a lot of different industries. We have probably competitors in the room. It's our opportunity to work together to really put some of these plans in place for the future. So thank you. I think we're now going to do Q&A. Thank you. And I think they're walking around with mics if anybody has Any questions? Do you get your dessert? I hope so. It looks like it's still there. Thank you. If not, I'm going to steal someone else's.
Hey, Kristen, great
Yeah.
presentation. What was the biggest challenge you ever faced from a board perspective?
Great question. Probably how much we wanted to talk or commitments that we wanted to make. When GM first made, our big commitments around EVs, we were first. And so I think putting that out there was uncomfortable, and I think took incredible leadership from, our CEO down. And the board actually was super supportive. I talked to them on a regular basis, and they really were behind the value. Again, though, showing them what it meant, right? Showing them it meant a growth opportunity and cost savings, and giving them the information that they needed to support those decisions. You guys are easy.
The don't take no from somebody who can't say yes line. I was just texting all my colleagues here. That is unbelievable lesson. The best line of the night for me. Thank you very much. So just a comment. Thank you.
You have to thank my husband. So yeah.
Love that guy. Love him.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Kristen, for that. I'm curious your thoughts with so many new data and AI solutions coming around. What do you think is the biggest opportunity for sustainability-oriented folks with regard to that new technology? Like, what's the biggest area to focus on? What questions are you asking now to help us apply that technology in a meaningful way for sustainability professionals?
Yeah, great question. I think honestly with AI, we don't know everything it's going to be able to do, right? I think we're all still learning. But if I think about how, we were applying it, whether it be from predictive reliability of, equipment, right? Equipment that breaks down or about to break down is less efficient, typically, and causes downtime and everything else. Certainly climate predictions. We would use a lot of information for everything from site selection of where we were putting facilities to where our suppliers were at, to even predicting, where did we need to invest for energy backup or different energy, supply sources. So I think there's lots more to come. And certainly we can talk about the power and everything else it's going to take, but I'm really the epitome of an optimist, and I really think innovation spurs innovation, and so we're just going to keep getting smarter and better with it.
Hey, Kristen, what a powerful message you've delivered tonight. So I commend you and thank you very much for pouring out years of experience and the way you walk the journey. But let me go back to something you and I have broached before, and that is the fact that, one, sustainability is a nascent space. And one of the things that challenges people is a fear of failure. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because sometimes when you don't know where the journey is going to end, it paralyzes people. Maybe you can share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michael. First off, Michael's always the one to boost me up. So, I think fear of failure is, those that were sitting at my table that were, commenting on my dessert know that getting up here and talking on my own is not the easiest thing for me, especially as an engineer. But with that said, I think failure, that fear of the unknown always paralyzes people, and that's when leadership comes to play. I talked about the mountain in front of them, right? You don't know how far you can go. Again, our renewable energy play was a great example. Our original commitment at GM was for 2050. We were going to be 100% renewable by 2050. We didn't know exactly how to get there. It ended up that because we started early and started moving, actually there'll be 100% renewable in the US this year. So 25 years ahead of schedule. Thank you. And again, a lot of that was my team, right? They were rock stars or are rock stars. But I think you got to show people that it's okay to stumble. It's okay if something, you know, EV adoption, right? Okay, it didn't go as quick. It doesn't mean we're changing our plan. It's just that the curve of acceleration is changing. And so I think we got to keep encouraging people of better, not perfect, and trying and looking for opportunities. And honestly, these events, you know, we all know there's a sustainability event you could probably go to every day of the year if you wanted to. I think this is brilliant of bringing sustainability and supply chain together. But these really are the opportunities to share ideas and learnings and help take care of some of that fear. So.
Hi. Thanks. This may be piggybacking a little bit. If so, feel free to ignore it and get to your dessert. But especially in the early days, when you're looking to bring sustainability as a major topic into your organization, how can you create a safe space for, I don't want to say the fence sitters, but the folks that, yes, they'll support it, but they don't have it in them to be the voice, right? And every site has its own culture, and especially, like you said, everything turns political these days in certain parts of the country. There's more of an appetite for sustainability even just as a word than others. How can you help create those pockets where people can feel safe enough amongst their peers to come and actually participate?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly really think it's meeting them where they're at, right? What does it mean to them? Whether it's their site, right? How can you create benefit for their site? How do you show benefit and show where there's been learnings and winnings? And, you know, the words you use don't matter, right? Use efficiency, use cost savings, use value creation, use from a nature standpoint, be a good neighbor, right? Whatever the words are, I think it's important for them to see why it means something to them and why they should care. You know, I talked about the plants, right? The last thing the plants have time for is another initiative, right? I mean, they have enough complexity with people showing up to work, quality product issues that have been sent in or changing whatever. And so to really get them to see why doing something in this space mattered, I think is important. Supply chain, you know, same thing, right? How do you educate your suppliers? It's about saving money, and, you know, and looking for those opportunities. So I don't think it needs to be giant. And I think that's part of the problem is sometimes we want to put this big, you know, huge goal out there that everybody, you know, walks around and draws posters or, well, we don't make posters anymore, but, you know, has signs up, whatever. It doesn't have to be that, right? It can be as small as getting that trash compactor working today and looking for those waste streams and those type of things.
What's your favorite GM vehicle?
That's a tough one. Actually, the funny part of the beginning of that story is when I started this job, I would go on a panel, right? And, you know, you had the GM talking points, of course, but I'd get asked what car I was driving, and at the time I was actually driving a Z06. And then I moved into an Escalade, and I really wasn't doing well. And so I gave a wishy-washy answer of liking to drive all products. I love the Lyric. If anybody's driven a Lyric, the Cadillac Lyric is a full EV. It's extremely affordable for a luxury vehicle. I would say it's one of the best luxury vehicles I've ever driven, not just an EV. It is a fantastic product. But I could go on. I could talk about GM products all day long. You'll get tired. If anybody wants to know why. All right. Well, thank you so much. Danielle, are you coming back up? Yep. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Let's give her another round of applause. There we go. So, before our dinner concludes, I did want to mention that obviously the night is still young, so we'll continue with cocktails over at the lobby bar. So I really hope to see you all there. If you're not, I'll know. So be there. And then breakfast will begin tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Don't worry, we will have plenty of coffee for you. Also, we do ask that if you are extending, or if you're not extending your stay, to bring your luggage down. We do have a spot that we could store it easily for you for the rest of the day. And then we do have a really fantastic breakfast panel tomorrow discussing waste to wealth, building this circular economy, and the future of global trade at 8 a.m., moderated by Neha Sharma, assistant professor at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, alongside a really great panel that you certainly do not want to miss. So everyone, enjoy your evening. Hope to see you all tonight for a drink, and we'll see you again in the morning. Thanks, everyone.